Hello everyone, my name is Jaleesa. I am One Love's social media manager and I'm very excited for today's conversation. I say that every time, but I really mean it today. I think a lot of us understand that in order to one day have a healthy relationship, you first have to deeply understand unhealthy behaviors. And so today we're actually going to be talking about just a few signs of digital abuse and how you could take action against it. In just a moment, I am going to invite my colleague Libby, who's going to join me for this conversation. I'm very excited to have her on. I think this is going to be a great conversation. One digital behavior you wish you knew were unhealthy sooner. Awesome. In the meantime, I am just going to bring Libby on. And there are folks. Hello. Thank you. Hi, Libby. How are
Hi,
you?
Alyssa. I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with you.
I am too. I'm so excited. I see some people popping in. Hello. Hi, Celine. Celine is my student back when I was teaching.
Hi, Celine. Welcome.
Hello. I see some other
Well,
folks. I'm so excited.
well, I know people are pretty familiar with my face, but I'm wondering if you want to just take a moment to tell them a little bit about all the stuff that you do.
Yes, I'll see. Hi, Karina. Karina is one of the TAs in my program out in Seattle. So that's a great segue. Hi, everybody. I'm Libby. I use her pronouns. I am on the One Love program team out in the Seattle office. So I get to work with all of our incredible schools and organizations who bring One Love to their community, also with our students. So super excited to be here with you today, Jaleesa, to talk a little bit about relationships online. What that look like?
Absolutely. And we're a bubbly crew, so there's a lot of smiling happening, but don't want to take away from the fact that this is actually a really important topic. It's actually quite a serious topic, especially if you're on the receiving end of this behavior. So please don't mind us too much. We're a smiley group, but we're very serious about digital behaviors, especially unhealthy ones. So without further ado, I just want to ground us in a definition. And hello, Jennifer. Scott has joined the chat. I'm so excited. This is going to be good. Really just want to ground us in the definition. First and foremost, digital abuse is when a partner or a friend uses technology, and that can be your phone, it can be social media, it can be messaging apps, it can even be dating apps. And they will use these technologies to harass you, intimidate you, maybe threaten you, in some cases manipulate you, coerce you into doing things you maybe don't want to, all via the phone or via technology in some way, shape, or form. Something else you should know is, although, digital abuse can happen to anyone and everyone, it can also happen at any stage of relationship. So it doesn't matter what gender you are, all genders can do digital unhealthiness. And it can happen, again, at any stage of a friendship or a relationship. And so really excited to have this conversation because I think although a lot of us are on our computers more so than ever, right? And not even on our computers, on our phones. For some reason, unhealthy dating abuse is something no one really talks about that much. Would you agree with that, Libby?
Totally. No one talks about it because we're so glued to our phones in so many different ways. There's a lot of blurred lines that we don't realize, I think, when things are starting to creep into our relationships and when they affect us versus maybe when we see them from afar.
100%. So actually, to start the conversation off, I think it would be great if we could just talk a little bit about some common misconceptions people might have about unhealthy digital abuse. And I'll start with one. I think one thing I've heard from folks often, unfortunately, is that, some folks tend to believe that sometimes that the behavior you're receiving online doesn't necessarily mimic or give you any sort of leave thought into how the person will be in person, which is not true. There is a link between offline behavior and online behavior. And it's important to realize that actually in a lot of cases, the behaviors someone uses online, whether it's to manipulate you, whether they're threatening towards you, whether they're just mean and belittling, are usually similar tactics that they would use against you in person. So a person that's very mean-spirited and nasty towards you or volatile towards you on the phone will probably be that way at some point in person with you. So it's very important to know that. And also it's important to know that in healthy relationships have healthy communication. So no one should be belittling you. No one should be making you feel bad about yourself or your interests. A healthy partner genuinely cares about your feelings, and that will translate whether they're in front of you or online. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. I think so often too, I hear these expressions like when people tell you who they are, believe them, or what happens in the dark will come to the light. And those are kind of isms that go around. But what that makes me think of is like people, it's sometimes easier to say things from behind a screen, but the more and more people do unhealthy behaviors, they kind of will, they're thinking about doing it anyway. So when it translates to the in-person relationship, it's still the same person you're talking to, just in a different setting. So somebody doesn't change just because they go from being behind a screen to being across the table.
100%, exactly. Are there any other misconceptions you can think of?
Yes, another kind of in that same vein, one I think about a lot is that sometimes we think like, oh, well, if we just want to keep it, we can just like turn off our phones and walk away and it goes away. But that's not the case, right? Like we talked about, if somebody's doing unhealthy things online, that behavior is going to happen regardless. And so even if you just try to like turn off your phone, throw it across the room, someone who really wants to control you or have some sort of power, they're the way to do it, unfortunately. So I think that's why, Jaleesa, I love talking about safety planning and breakup planning. I think that kind of ties in here of, yes, you want to think about how you're setting boundaries online, but it's not enough to just block somebody digitally. You can't just think that because you've cut them off online, you won't see them in real life.
Exactly. I love everything that you just said. So important to think about, weigh the pros and the cons of an option. And if your relationship is abusive, actually doing so could be dangerous, especially if they don't see you in person, if there's in-person time with them ever. So I love all of that stuff.
I also want to make a flag here that we have a ton of resources available, that if you're worried you're in an unhealthy relationship, you're trying to end it, you're trying to escape the abuse, we have resources at joinonelove.org/gethelp. You can also just navigate through our website and we can connect you so that you can make that, so you're not alone in ending the relationship.
Awesome. And Karina said so true, I think, to something you said, which was really sweet. Thank you guys so much for the support. And then we have someone else named They Adore Carissa 10. Be careful what you do online and be careful who you meet. Very, very true.
Yes.
Very, very true. Be careful who you meet online. You never know. I think another misconception that comes to mind for me, Libby, is this idea that digital abuse is not as serious as in-person abuse. Kind of in that same vein as, oh, just block them. It doesn't matter. You can just ignore their behavior. And it's like, actually, no. Something that's important to remember is that there are all types of abuses, right? So there's verbal abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's mental abuse. None of these are physical. Right. All of these are just as damaging and just as serious as physical abuse or abuse that might happen in person. Right. And all of these can happen over the phone.
Yep.
So they are just as important and just as serious as physical abuse, something we typically think of when we think of a very serious situation.
I think it's even more important to think about because sometimes these are happening in somebody's DMs, right? Or like buried in the comment section of an Instagram or TikTok. And so it can be easy to sweep under the rug because you think it's kind of going to get buried in with all this other stuff, but the behavior is still there. The intent is still there. I see someone you used to know 101 just said the thing with online bullying is that it's like 24/7 all year. Yes. Right. There's so many different ways that we interact with people. And so, you might be like, oh, it's just online. But I don't think anything is just online anymore.
Exactly. And it's interesting. That's such a great point. Someone you used to know 101, because while before, technology was a huge part of our lives, which was actually, I'm talking about maybe our childhood, Libby.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, if you wanted to like leave that stuff at school, you really could disconnect from it when you go home. But nowadays, that's just not the reality. So if bullying is happening in person, or if harassment or relationship abuse is happening in person, these are just another tool for someone to be able to come at you, unfortunately. We also got another comment. I think this is Karina Bettery. And so much of our lives are online right now. It would be such a shame to have to keep all accounts private because you're worried your abuser will find them. So true. But unfortunately, the reality for some folks who don't want to be contacted by someone from the past, unfortunately. Such a great point, though.
I think that's why it's so important for us to teach what does it look like to have healthy behaviors online? How do we practice healthy things? How do we build stronger relationships? So that, right, we can hopefully create a world, our dream world, right, where everyone can have public social media and be able to interact. We always want to be careful. We always want to be safe, but we hope that someday that's something we aren't as worried about because we are interacting with each other and communicating in a healthier way.
Exactly. I'm wondering, Libby, actually, can you share some wisdom or some of your insights? When is it okay just thinking along the lines of healthy digital housekeeping, healthy digital behaviors based off of Karina's comment? I'm just wondering, in your opinion, when is it okay, if ever, to share sensitive information with a partner? And can it be used against you?
Yeah, great question, Julie. I actually was thinking about this recently because I went on a trip with a friend of mine and we were going out, we were going hiking. So we were going to be kind of far in the woods in the middle of nowhere. We're two young-ish women and we're like, okay, we want to stay safe. What's something we can do? So we were like, okay, we're going to share our location with each other. I work at One Love, so I'm very, very cautious to share my location with anybody. But I had this conversation like, you know what, we're going to share our locations for this trip. And then when the trip is done, I don't need to know where you are. You don't need to know where I am. It's not that we're hiding anything, but it's just this is a boundary. I like to people, so we shared our locations for the trip. It was super helpful. It made me feel better when we were off hiking. And then when I got home, I unshared and she unshared, and it was okay, moving on, right? And so what I love, why I like talking about that story and why I felt like a good One Lover in the moment was, right, that was, we communicated, we were on the same page, and that was something that was comfortable for both of us. But we also set a limit on it, right? You don't need to share, once you share, it's not forever. You're allowed to change your mind, you're allowed to undo it. So I think that's a great way where we can balance our desire for safety with our desire for our own independence and our boundaries.
I think that's such a good story because when you did it because you were comfortable and you felt like the situation, it was needed at that time. But your boundary is actually after the situation and the possible danger was over, you were just like, okay, actually, I don't want to share my location anymore. And they were okay with it and you were okay with it. Everyone was happy. I think if someone reacts negatively to that situation, how can you, if your partner were to say, like, actually, I want you to share your location with me all the time, like, what are some tools people can use to kind of start a conversation with them about, like, why that might not be the most comfortable for them?
Yeah, great question. And that's so hard, right? Because you don't want to just share your location with everybody. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable, but some people have, they may have had some past experiences where they're nervous or they want to be able to help someone. And so I always recommend sitting down and having a conversation about it. If my partner really wants me to share, someone you used to know just took the words out of my mouth. Ask them why. There may be a really specific reason or purpose that they have in mind. And so think about how can you share your location in that limited purpose. If the answer is, I want to know where you are all the time, well, then that's probably another conversation that you should have. Right? We talk independence, one of our healthy signs. as I get older, it's probably my favorite healthy sign of making sure that you can do your own thing, have things that you do together and things that you do apart. And location sharing is something in there that can be a little funky, but ask them why and just kind of calmly, respectfully, right? Always be respectful. Reiterate your boundary and talk about why you don't want to share your location, and why it's important to keep that area of your life.
Exactly. And it should never be a requirement in a relationship to share your location. I can see that. Like, I definitely, for myself, even shared my location when I went to the Pride parade recently this year. And I was just like trying to find my friends in a city.
Yes.
It was impossible.
Yep.
Unless we shared our location. So, but
Right.
once the parade was over, we kind of just went back to being anonymous people. And it was fine. No one was like, you know, if you loved me or cared for me, I should know, you know, where you are all the time.
Lisa, anytime someone uses the word if, I'm like, no. We shouldn't put conditions on this. If you love me, right? We're not going to do that, because then that's we get into this manipulation and guilting behavior. Then that veers into unhealthy, as opposed to things that we're doing to be safe or to be supportive of each other. And I have been in those situations too, right? The calling is, I'm standing by the third lamppost with the red flag, right?
Right.
So there's tons of times when it does make sense to share. But also those times are short-lived. Turn it off.
Awesome. Yes. I hope you guys are taking notes. The partnership share your so I love that. Another thing I was curious about your opinions on, Libby, to read receipts or to not. This is like the source, I feel, of a lot of drama in relationships, unfortunately. And sometimes more lighthearted drama, just miscommunication, and sometimes more serious. So help us out there.
All right. As somebody with a really poor attention span, read receipts make me very anxious, because sometimes somebody might text me and it pops up and I look at it and then I get distracted. It's so innocent. And I actually was talking to one of our TAs about this recently. And she had reached out and she was like, hey, like, one of my friends that keeps talking about read receipts, and like, I don't know that I want to do that. What can I say? She was asking like, how to put that boundary. And I was like, honestly, you can just pretend you're me and just say like, hey, I don't want you to think that I'm ignoring you. I just genuinely sometimes open a message and forget about it, but I don't want, like, almost kind of put it back, be like, I don't want to create a situation where you're feeling anxious. I've never seen read receipts. Some people may like them, great. I've never seen them like add value, or other than just like you're just like a noted. But right then you can like thumbs up or like a message. So just saying like, you know what? I don't want to cause you any stress. I don't want you to be nervous about whether I'm responding or not. So I'm not going to turn them on, because I got a lot going on, right? We're on right now, Jaleesa, I think I have 4 different screens up in my home, and it's the middle of the day. So we're all over the place all the time.
Yeah, totally. I did want to highlight a comment, and I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on this, Libby. Someone you used to know one-on-one says, what are some red flags to spot early on in an online conversation that someone has an abusive personality or will be abusive in the future?
Ooh, great question. So a thing that I like to think about, right, is that we like to think about the specific behaviors that we see. And one of the early ones that we can see is intensity. So often when there's like a mismatch in texting, so maybe, and now be mindful, right? Some people are stream of consciousness. I might send 5 texts, but there's 6 words in each, while other people send it in a block. But thinking as you're scrolling through the conversation, is there equal balance of gray and blue, or gray and green if you have an Android, right? So are your conversations going back and forth at the same cadence? If one person is texting a lot more than the other, and the person who's not texting as much has some shorter responses, right? That might be a sign that they're not so comfortable with the relationship, that this pace is moving too fast. So that's one of the quickest ones I see. Also just different things where people, we can see negative comments come up. Belittling is one that we see, either in DMs. that's a whole big rabbit hole. But even just in comments, sometimes people will say negative comments, and that's a red flag too.
Yeah, I mean,
What
I think
else?
the biggest. Sorry, go ahead, Libby.
I was gonna say, are there any that I missed that you want to add?
No, I think intensity is a big one. It also coincides with this whole conversation I think I see online happening around love bombing. I think intensity and love bombing go hand in hand. So on one hand, are they pushing the pace of the relationship at a speed that you're not comfortable with? Or are they being overly, adoring to you to the point where it almost feels like it's not even real? You know what I'm saying? I feel like that's even a red flag as well. And then one thing I just wanted to say is, like, there are things we can say to look out for early on in a relationship or a situation, whatever. But the reality is usually you learn about a person over time.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is to really take your time when you get to know someone. Really take your time to make sure their behavior matches up with what they say. All of that it comes with time.
Yeah.
People will eventually show you who they are with time. Don't try and predict the future necessarily on that first date. But if there are things that make you feel uncomfortable, take note. Don't ignore.
For sure.
Yes.
I think that's such a great thing to think about too, because we talk a lot about the first red flags and the beginning of the relationship, but sometimes things can come up later too. And so even if you've been in a longer relationship, looking out for changes in behavior, right? Is somebody always frantically trying to be the first one to comment or the first one to like your posts, right? That's something where if that kind of comes out of nowhere, that's something to pay attention to and say like, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay? Like, this feels different. This feels uncomfortable.
One other thing I was hoping to get your insights on, Libby, sharing passwords. Ooh. This is the topic of the year, I feel.
Yeah.
Everyone has an opinion about sharing passwords with your partner or friend. So I'm just wondering, what do you feel about that, Libby?
I think this one's tricky, right? Because with location sharing, you can turn it off. With password sharing, right? You don't want to have to be constantly changing your password. That's a lot of work and I would never remember it. So you really want to think about, who do you trust? Hopefully you have trust with your friends or your partner. But being mindful of if somebody says like, hey, tell me your password. If you're not comfortable, I just say, hold it up to my face. Right? Like sometimes I'll be driving and somebody wants to look at something on my phone. I'm not going to tell you my password necessarily, but if you hold it up, like Face ID is a magical thing. If you are comfortable sharing a password, always make sure that you explain like the conditions around it. If you want to give someone just like free reign to your devices, that's awesome. But I think it's a general good practice to say like, hey, yeah, here's my password. Like, just don't go through, like, I'd appreciate if you didn't go through all my pictures, or I appreciate if you didn't go through all my texts. Like, when you're giving them the password, clarify like what's the specific purpose that you're having them look through. Remember that most phones, you can take pictures without needing the password. You can like swipe over. So there's some things like that where some people may say like, oh, you have to tell me your password. Again, like we were saying, with the location sharing and with read receipt, if somebody's ever making it a condition of the relationship and saying like, if you really love me, you'd share it, or if you really trusted me, if I trusted you, right, you shouldn't have to say if you really trust me. So when those things come up, right, that's an instance for you to kind of take a minute and say like, I want to think about this, or I'm not super comfortable with this, right? And your friend and partner should respect that. Some people are just really private. We have a lot of personal information in our phones. Some people have medical information in their phones. Sometimes people have like private messages with family, with friends, with partners, right? And no one's entitled to else's digital information.
And it's your property.
Yeah.
You have the right to say no.
Exactly. No is a complete sentence.
It's a complete sentence. Exactly. I love that statement.
Yep.
I did want to just highlight, this is my land, says taking time is so painful, in response to our last conversation. Taking time is so painful because you'll probably just be drained at the end. Gosh. Oh, this is my land. No. in my mind, hear me out here. We're
I'm here.
giving you some tools to recognize some unhealthy behaviors, hopefully early on in a relationship, so that you don't have to spend too much time with someone who makes you feel drained, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if by the end of a 2 month situation, you're like, actually, this doesn't feel good for me. I think I've had enough. I'm gonna stop it here. I'm so proud of you. That's exactly what we want. On the flip side, if after 3 months you're like, this is amazing, this person is consistent, this person consistently makes me feel like my best self, I feel like I can completely let my guard down around them, then yay. But all good things take time.
Oh yeah.
I hate to say that. Like, I feel like that's such a womp womp statement, but you would know, Libby. You've been in an 8-year relationship.
My husband and I have been together for over 10 years now, so I'm all about the slow and steady wins the race. But yeah, Julissa, I mean, at the end of the day, right, when we set out to establish relationships and make friendships, right, our hope is that we're going to be in those relationships for a really long time. But so in that sense, right, like there's no rush, slow and steady. But also the thing that I wish I knew when I was younger is you're not a bad person if your relationship ends. You have not failed. Sometimes there are there are seasons in our lives for different people. I think about when I was in college, right? You meet so many incredible people. I can't keep up with everybody, but I still really value the relationships that I had. Some of those people have since come back into my life. But just because friendships kind of ebb and flow doesn't mean that they were any less valuable too. So I think that's important to remember, that if you're in a relationship and you're working hard, and it kind of fizzles out, that's not necessarily, doesn't make you a person, doesn't make you a bad relationship, or I don't know if that's a word, I just made it up, but right. So remembering, right, it's okay for relationships to end. And that, I think that kind of gets to our commenter's point of sometimes it can be, we feel this pressure to like keep relationships moving to the next step. And when we're online, there's this whole idea of like, we soft launch our partners, we hard launch our partners, like IG official, right? All of it. Are you going to put their initials in your bio? All of this stuff, like that. I don't know if the people do this much, we were Facebook official, right?
Yes.
But like all of that stuff, like you get to move at the pace you want to move at. If you want to soft launch or hard launch your partner, go for it. If you want to keep your partner off your social media, also go for it, right? It's totally up to you.
Both are valid, 100%. This conversation around sharing profiles, sharing passwords and so on and so forth, really gets me thinking about boundaries and consent, which is not typically a topic or topics we think of when we think about dating, digital relationships anyway. Yeah. So I was just wondering if you can kind of walk us through the connection there.
Yeah. An acronym that I love, we use this a lot in our programs that we borrowed from Planned Parenthood, RISE, right? And so anytime you're thinking about giving consent, sometimes people, when you hear consent, a lot of people think of that in terms of like sexual or physical relationships. Consent is everywhere. And so sometimes we use consent interchangeably with permission, right? Consent is just permission to do something. And so consent should be freely given, right? You're not being pressured or manipulated. Think back to when I was talking about those like 5, 6, 7, 8 text messages. If somebody's going at it, trying to get you to do something, any response is not freely given, right? Then we've got reversible, So reversible, I saw Karina mention this in a comment too. You can change your password, right? So if you've given someone your password and you're like, wish I didn't do that. You can't remember their memory. We're not at that point in the world yet, but you can go in and change your password. You can unshare your location. You can turn off read receipts, right? You can delete pictures that you've maybe posted or whatever. So you're always allowed to change your mind. That's the R. Informed is similar to freely given, but I like to think about informed, right, when we're talking about posting pictures. That's something that we haven't talked about yet, Julissa. And if somebody says like, oh, Libby, can I post this picture of us online? I'm going to say, where are you going to post it? Not because I am trying to like follow their every move, but you know what? I like to know where my face is going to be, where my name is going to be. I want to like be Googling myself and see something pop up I didn't sign on to. So informed, saying like, post this picture, but not this one. And that also, I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to do the fries out of here. Go along with specific. So, right, that's the S of fries. When we consent to something specific. So you can put this picture in this place, and then enthusiastic. You want to be excited about all these interactions you're having. Like if you're like, oh, if you're hesitant, if you're not really sure, if you're kind of like, I guess I have to, that's not enthusiastic, right? You should never be like, oh, I guess I have to do this. You should be like, oh yeah, I do want to share this with this person. They're important to me. I care about them, right? You're at Pride, like, yeah, I'm in my location with my friends so we can find each other. Like, I'm pumped about this. So you should, all of these. So I know we're just talking. You can't see the visual. I haven't quite learned the part of get it to float up here yet. But we've got F is freely given. R is reversible. I is informed. E is enthusiastic. And S is specific.
Fries.
Fries. Love
So
it.
easy to remember. I love fries. It makes me like, it's just so good. And like Karina said in the comments, it applies to so many things. There's not that many things you can do with another person without getting some of those aspects like okayed with them. Like, oh, we want to go to this place to do this thing with each other. Like, you know what I'm saying? When you think about it, you know, consent really runs the world. It helps us like do things smoothly.
Oh yeah. I mean, even today when I joined this live, I had a request. You asked me if I wanted to join the live, and I enthusiastically. So
that makes me so happy. Yay. Well, this wouldn't be a One Love live, I think, if we didn't give you guys some actionable tips to go through the day with. So just want to talk a little bit about some general safety tips that you can take with you. And some of them we did kind of go over during this call, but do want to just reiterate. The first one is you do not have to share your passwords, right? And that kind of goes in line with you don't have to share your location. In a healthy relationship, your partner, as Libby has said throughout this live, will never make you feel obligated to hand over information that you're not comfortable handing over information with. And if there's a specific reason why they would like you to share it, you guys can talk about what that reason is, and whether you think it makes sense for you. And also, if there's a specific reason that doesn't have to do with something outside of your relationship, like an event you're going to or something, like maybe your partner is struggling with jealousy or anxiety about the relationship that stems from other trauma, you know, that's something you guys can talk about and kind of work through in a way that's healthy, that doesn't involve you handing over information that you're not comfortable doing.
Right. Always assume the best too, right?
Always assume the best.
People have past experiences that make it so talk about it.
Yep.
Another one that we talked about a little bit, but I think goes to this like comfortable pace and independence. You don't have to respond to your messages right away. Sometimes we feel anxious or like we're beholden to a friend or a partner to always be available. Sometimes I'll just say like, hey, I'm working on a big project for work right now. Like, I'm not gonna be able to text back for the next couple hours. Like, it's not you, it's me. Right. And so I'm setting that pace and I'm setting that back for myself. So it's okay to not be glued to your phone 20.
Good point. Another one is you do not ever have to share explicit videos, photos, or messages that you're not comfortable exchanging with someone. In fact, if you are under the age of 18, I believe in most states, Libby, you could actually get in trouble for sharing images of yourself, because it's considered, I don't even know if we can say it on the live actually.
Yeah, so I would say just like err on the side of caution, right? You never know if you're under 18. And then if you're over 18, that's a great opportunity to have a really transparent conversation. I'm sharing this with you for this purpose. And only if you're comfortable, right? Like we said, no is a complete sentence. And if you say no, your friends and partners respect that.
Exactly. And something else to mention is if you do decide to share explicit photos of you or videos of you, it can change the dynamics of a relationship, right? Because suddenly this person, you went from being probably very evenly empowered in the relationship to someone having something that is sensitive and potentially embarrassing to you, you know, they now have that in their possession. So unless you really, really trust this person, I would err on the side of caution, as Libby said.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Also, I think is really important to remember is if you are getting threatening or manipulative or belittling, any of the unhealthy behaviors, if those are coming across in your messages or your voicemail, save those, right? It's going to be really helpful. Sometimes like if you're going to be talking to a friend later to get that gut check, is this okay? Having screenshots, having recordings saved, that's just a good thing for you to be able to kind of go back and reflect on, because sometimes in the moment, it's hard, right? It's really hard to know. And so I think it's being able to kind of keep those receipts for yourself. It just makes you feel better and can remind you like I did the right thing.
100%. One other thing I wanted to mention is to get to know your social media privacy settings, your phone privacy settings. Libby, you know, there was just some recent news out recently that, you know, a new update basically now allows for certain social media platforms, unless you toggle off precise location, to actually share your precise location with the world. So if there are people out there who you don't want to share that information with, you would have to actually go into your privacy settings, go into every app, unfortunately, and toggle off.
So, but when we were in the office together the other day, and I was like, Julissa, look what I found, right? And you can just go through, toggle them off. Also, it's just good if you're somebody who independent relationships cares about your online privacy. Big companies having access to your data. Safe and sorry. Like think about SnapMap by my friends. Also, the big thing, Julissa, where I learned it was because with Instagram posts, you tag your location, it's like the general city that you're in. And it got really specific and started flagging like people's houses or hotels. So I think it's really important to turn that off again for safety. You don't need the whole world knowing where you are every minute of the day.
You definitely don't want the whole world to know where you are every minute of the day. That's just not even, I don't think anyone wants that. So, such a good flag, Libby. And this was a great live. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Everyone, encourage you to check out our 10 signs of digital abuse at joinonelove.org. We're launching a huge campaign. We have some great examples right on our homepage, and we'll be continuing to share a ton of content with you throughout the fall. I'll let Julissa add in more details on that.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned earlier in this live, you know, you never deserve to be mistreated by a partner, whether it's mistreatment you're experiencing in person or online. And so definitely, if you are experiencing any of these unhealthy behaviors that we described during this live, go to joinonelove.org/get-help. See if you can connect with one of our trusted partners. Someone will reach out to you, or you can reach out to them and someone will talk to you about some of the options and how unhealthy the relationship potentially is, actually, and what you can do about it. So definitely reach out for help if you need some support with a relationship.
And trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, we gave you a ton of examples, but we can't fit them all into one live. So if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. So trust your gut.
Awesome. And like Libby said, we have a new campaign coming up, so keep your eyes peeled because there will be more information shared soon. Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Julissa.
Thanks, Libby. I'll talk to you later. Bye.